Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City Council chambers of the City of Urbana. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We have a very lively discussion planned for you. A lot of people who've put in a lot of hard work into this issue. So we are very grateful for your attendance and your appreciation, or excuse me, your participation in this meeting this evening. My name is Aaron Ammons. I will be the MC or the moderator of the event tonight. I don't know how I got this position, but here I am. So we definitely want to hear from you, so there will be question and answer toward the end of this discussion. And so at this point, I'd just like to introduce the people who you will hear from tonight. So first, you'll hear from this lovely lady in this sort of gold, beige, something going on. I don't know if I bought that necklace or not, but Sister Carol will be speaking first. And I think many of you here who know who she is as a representative of District 5 on the county board, fighting for the people as usual. So she will grace you with her information, and she'll share some information with you when we begin. You will eventually hear also from Rachel Schwartz, who is a county board elect. Rachel Schwartz has a PhD in accounting from Northwestern. She has been with the Department of Accountancy at Illinois since 2003 and made headlines in 2008 as the U of I professor that investigated the county nursing home finances. So you hear from Rachel at some point. And also, from millions of miles away, Decarcerate Monroe County. These group of individuals that you see here from an organization called Decarcerate Monroe County. You will also hear from them, maybe not in this order, but you'll hear from Erin Marshall on the end there, who works in social services to assist people with the basic needs of food and shelter. Currently, she manages the largest food pantry in southern Indiana, Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, coordinating the organization's volunteer program. Erin is responsible for Decarcerate Monroe County's film series, among other projects. She lends her efforts to other local political groups and ran for county council in 2011, losing by a single vote. That's why you all need to get out there and vote all the time, even in Indiana, right? And she threatens to run again, she says. So you'll hear from Erin Marshall at some point. Next to her, on her left, you will hear from Judah Shept. Judah is a scholar, an activist, and an assistant professor of criminal justice at Eastern Kentucky University. Judah's research and teaching examine the representations, enactments, and contestations. Am I saying that right? All right. That was a big word for me. I got to break that one down. Contestations of mass incarceration. Judah received his PhD in 2011 from Indiana University, Bloomington, where he also co-founded Decarcerate Monroe County. Lindsay Campbell Badger, who is here next to me, is a mother, an active member of her neighborhood association, McDowell Gardens, and a PhD student in communication and culture at Indiana University. She is a current member of Decarcerate Monroe County and helps run the IU-PCF think tank at Putnamville Medium Security Prison in Greencastle, Indiana. Last but not least, you will hear from Nicole Siegel, who is an associate professor of American Studies at Indiana University in Bloomington. She has published widely on race, power, and culture in the Americas, particularly in the U.S. and Brazil, and is currently researching a transnational history of U.S. policing during the Cold War. A longtime activist with critical resistance, Nicole is a convener of the Critical Prison Studies Caucus of the American Studies Association and founding member of Decarcerate Monroe County. So we have a quite distinguished panel of people here who have put in time and effort and are experts in their areas. So we plan to have quite a bit of information to share with you all tonight. So thank you. I think they deserve that. I didn't want to read this young lady's full bio because I didn't know if I had time for all that. But please, I'm going to turn it over to Sister Carol Ammons.
I'll say that I am a proud member of Champaign Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice, who is putting on this forum. I appreciate all of those who've put in time and effort to not only come to this event, but to do the research and the work. around this issue, which is a very important issue. I'm also a county board member currently in my 4th term with the Champaign County Board District 5, of which I've had great pleasure serving and have learned a lot. With that, I'll just start with just a little bit of background for not this viewing audience probably, but certainly the viewing audience at home, so that they'll have a little history and summary of our county jail here locally. The Satellite Jail, which is the jail built out in East Urbana, was completed in 1996, leaving Champaign County with a $10 million construction bond to pay off. Chapter 55, Act 5, Section 5-1006-.5 of the Illinois Compiled Statutes authorizes counties to issue a quarter-cent per dollar sales tax on transactions in Champaign County. In 1997, voters rejected the tax by a narrow vote of 10,238 yeses to 10,890 noes. This referendum lost by a mere 652 votes. This referendum will be very important to the question at the end of this discussion. So I'll start it off and end it with the very same question to you. The Champaign County Board issued another quarter-cent sales tax referendum in '98. At this time, the voters approved the referendum by a somewhat larger margin of 24,330 yeses to 21,952 noes. This really paints the picture as to the vote matters. In both ordinances in 1997 and '98 that was sent the quarter-cent sales tax referendum for the county-wide voter approval, the sales tax was advertised and promised to be repealed once the bonds covering the new addition to the courthouse, the new youth detention center, and the Satellite Jail from 1996 were paid off. Unfortunately, prior to that happening, the county board in 2003 decided that they would pass another resolution basically repealing the original ordinance that was put forward to the voters to end this tax, but to continue it, and this happened in 2003. All of this information is available at cucpj.org, and I want you to go there because you can follow the whole line of how we got to where we are right now. Several important ordinances happened in the 2003 year where this tax was made permanent and would be a continuation to maintain the county criminal justice system, for which it is done ever since that point. I won't read the whole entire process here, but in 2003, an excerpt from the News Gazette article that quoted some board members' reaction to using the quarter-cent tax for other projects, new projects, as well as things like utility bills, which ultimately will be put before the voters as to whether we will pay for a new building with this quarter-cent sales tax. They decided that they would continue to do this because, quote, the county needed the money. This is an important part of this discussion. Can we pay for an expensive renovation to our county jail by demolishing the one downtown and opening up a new one? I say no. I've been on a county board for 4 years and will end my term in November. That ending of my term will not end my work on this issue around social justice or the jail systems, period, nor the criminal justice system. I would ask those who are participating tonight, as you hear the stories of Monroe County and the experiences that they went through, the things that they had to do, I employed the community here in Champaign County to not only get involved, but ask the tough questions. Why is it that we are talking about spending $20+ million on a project for which we in this room and many in the viewing audience would probably believe is unreasonable and not necessary? I would, at this point, like to turn it back over to the moderator, and I'll come back later with other information as we go on through this dialogue to share as far as our county experience, and turn it over to Monroe County, back to the moderator to continue the discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Sister Carol. And thank you so much for your service in District 5. I voted for you.
Thank you.
Not just because she's my wife. I would have voted for her for real, because she bout it. You know what I mean? She gonna work for the people. I also want to remind you all that at some point you'll get a chance to speak. Those of you who like to stay off camera, you'll be able to ask your questions or make your statement from the floor. But those of you who like to be a part of the viewing audience, you'll be able to step up to the and have a seat here at the table and ask your question or make your statement a little later on in this process. So there's also a sign-up sheet that's out there somewhere, and we'd like to make sure that you sign your name, give a legible email address. There's nothing like trying to read an email address that you can't read, right? So please sign the list so we can make sure we follow up with you as well. So we want to keep this moving, and at this point, we're going to turn it over to some of the folks from Monroe County. I don't know who's going to go first, but I'll let them decide on that. Is it going to be you?
I think I'm going.
Judah. So Judah Shept.
Evening, folks.
Good evening.
So yeah, I think 3 of the 4 of us are going to take up the next 15 minutes or so by telling you a bit of our story, although all 4 of us will be answering questions at the end. So Decarcerate Monroe County is from Monroe County, Indiana. It's where Bloomington or Indiana University Bloomington is located. And we're an all-volunteer grassroots organization that coalesced around sort of a similar proposal. And so what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about the proposal that our county proposed that sort of catalyzed our group coming together, give you sort of some of the contours of what that looked like, and tell you a little bit about our origins as a group. And then Aaron and Nicole will tell you a little bit more some of the specific details about what our group sort of looks like and some of our victories. So the proposal is actually kind of objectively pretty drastic, just to be honest. What was proposed in late 2007 was what the county called a justice campus, which would have sat on 85 acres on the south side of Bloomington and would have had 3 sort of constitutive institutions, a new jail, a new juvenile detention facility, and a work release center, and also sort of new space for county criminal justice offices. The jail itself would have been built for a capacity of 400, and keep in mind Monroe County is about, my understanding is Monroe County is about half the size of your county here. So the new jail would have been built with 400 beds with room to expand by 400 more. The juvenile facility would be 72 beds with room to double in capacity, and then the work release center as well. So sort of taken as a whole, it was the largest sort of proposal for carceral expansion in the county's history. And again, it would have sat on 85 acres and would have been called a justice campus. And so it's like pretty clear. The county sort of took the identity of Bloomington, this sort of collegiate, bucolic place, and mapped it onto this call for this drastic expansion of our criminal justice system. And I should also point out, the way that folks in Bloomington talked about it was pretty different than we tend to talk about incarceration expansion. It was proposed through sort of discourses of rehabilitation and benevolence and education. And I should also point out our county political bodies are almost exclusively comprised of Democrats, many sort of self-proclaimed liberal and progressive Democrats at that. These were the biggest proponents of this proposal. Why the proposal occurred is the jail that was current at the time of the proposal and that currently exists was built in 1986 with a capacity of 126 folks. It was built at the time, it doubled the current capacity of the county. It was built, and within months in 1986, it was filled and indeed overcrowded. And so since 1986, there's been sort of, rumors and discussions about expanding, and then finally, under the threat of a lawsuit, because of conditions at the jail due to overcrowding, which I should tell you include things like folks sleeping in the showers, outbreaks of staph infection, total absence of necessary toiletries and things like that, sort of gross sort of human rights violations. Because of that, the county proposed this massive expansion, the Justice Campus. We got wind of it. By we, I mean just a few of us, 4 friends, got wind of the proposal and sat down together in the spring of 2008 and said, this seems pretty serious. This is a pretty significant expansion of our criminal justice system. We should talk about this and figure out what to do. And this conversation between friends sort of grew out and included more and more people. And eventually, we sort of started building towards one major event, or our first major event on May 3rd of 2008, which was a day of popular education about sort of what we call the prison industrial complex and its very local, very specific manifestations in Monroe County in Bloomington. That day looked It was a full day and looked like a lot of different things. We had a lot of sort of popular education campaigns, or popular education exercises, I should say, where we sort of facilitated discussions about what safety even means. I mean, it was about this many folks, frankly, maybe 60, 70, 80 folks, and we would just sit at the room and sort of open it up and say, what does safety mean to you? And to be honest with you, and included in that group of folks were judges and politicians and civic leaders and folks like that. And as vibrant a discussion as that was, nothing came up that said, you know, more jail space makes me feel safe, or more cops on the street makes me feel safe. What came up was things like, you know, my basic needs being met, and knowing my neighbors, and feeling empowered, having access to health care and education. And so it was just a really important moment, I think, where we intervened in this narrative that we had to sort of build this massive new criminal justice system to respond to these issues of overcrowding. The other thing we did, which I think would be an important conversation for y'all to have, is in that very room where this sort of May 3rd day occurred, we had a lot of material up on the walls that was actually from 1986, so from the first sort of jail expansion discussion. We had a number of sort of older activists who were in the room with us, who were around for that first community discussion about jail expansion in 1986, who had written popular materials for it. We had it up in the room. And so we were able to sort of visually make this historical linear narrative and visually see that the ways that folks were sort of rationalizing expansion in 1986 was almost exactly the same language in 2008. And all we had been doing in Monroe County, and as probably almost all of you know in the United States over that same period, is growing our systems frankly with poor people. And so that was also really important to let folks see that the conversation that we were having actually has sort of historical precedence, and the conversation we were talking about, the conversation we were having, was actually, you know, the direct result. It was sort of in the same trajectory as this older conversation. So Erin's going to talk next about sort of some of the more tactical, strategic things that we've done over the years.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some key events that we had, some tactics that we used, and some ways that we interacted with the community to kind of mobilize folks and to educate folks and to make sure that people knew what their tax dollars were going to be spent on, and so that folks knew what people in their community were going through. Something that we found is that if folks hadn't directly experienced incarceration themselves or having a family member incarcerated, it was kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing. And so we wanted to make sure that everyone understood that our jail is located in the heart of our downtown, and it looks like a large office building. And it's actually surrounded by some of the most expensive apartments in town that you can buy. And a lot of folks that live in those apartments don't even know that the jail is there. So there was a lot of popular education that took place. There was a lot of interfacing with local politicians and local leaders, and you know, chatting with folks who work in social service agencies and utilizing the experience and the expertise that they have, and getting them to go and talk to political officials as well, people who were elected and people who actually had control over making this decision about whether or not we were going to build a new jail. So we went to a lot of meetings of our county council, of our county commissioners. We were present at all of the meetings where the company that was contracted to come up with a proposal for what this Justice Campus would look like. They held community meetings where they were supposedly taking input about what our community needed. And so we made sure that we were present there and that we made our opinions known. We also made sure that we connected with folks who were most affected. So we went to our jail during visiting hours and we talked with folks who were there visiting family and friends that were incarcerated inside and learned from them what the problems were. So that's how we learned about staph infections and people sleeping in the showers and folks eating moldy food and all of these really gross conditions that folks were being forced to live under. And then we took that information to county meetings, and we said it to elected officials, and it was on tape, and it played on our local television station. And so, folks heard about this, and they started to learn what was actually happening inside of this institution that maybe they believed was keeping them safe because they hadn't really thought about it. But then once we started talking about the unhumanitarian conditions that were happening inside the jail and asking folks what really made them feel safe, it made a big difference. We used the media, like I said, we used our local television station. We have a community radio station that we were able to really utilize and disseminate a lot of information that way. And we also worked really hard to show people that they were supporting a plan for expansion. So the county officials who didn't really believe that building a new jail would actually be expanding the capacity for incarcerating more folks. They're thinking, well, our jail is overcrowded and the conditions are really bad, and so the way to solve that is to build a new jail. Naturally, that's the humanitarian way to solve that. But it's not humanitarian to keep people in cages. That doesn't work for our communities. Once we were able to say that in a very plain and logical way and kind of make people face that, it makes it impossible to deny. So we found a lot of success in that. We do not have a juvenile detention facility in Monroe County, and that was to be a part of the Justice Campus. There was an argument that keeping kids local was better than shipping them out of the county, and the argument that we made is that taking children away from their family doesn't work, that is where a child's support system is, and we have a lot of social service agencies in town that are able to help kids, and we don't need to put them in cages and incarcerate them. It also came out in that, like Judah said, that Justice Campus was to hold 72 beds for juveniles. And through these discussions that we're having with politicians, it comes out that there were 7 kids on any given day that were actually being sent out of the county. So to build a 72-bed institution for those children seemed quite ridiculous. However, part of the intention for that was also that we could take kids from other counties, which was supposedly exactly what we were working against with our own children in our county. Lastly, what I want to talk about is a little bit of media that we have worked on ourselves and disseminated throughout the county and have had a lot of luck with. The most recent thing that we have made is a pamphlet that we have plenty of copies of and is available today. It's called Our Community Justice System, Practical Local Solutions. It is a fantastic pamphlet, in my opinion. And it has a lot of really great ideas about things that we can do to shrink incarceration so that we don't have to rely on building new jails or bigger jails, and so that maybe eventually we can get rid of them altogether. So Nicole's going to talk a little bit more about this, and yeah, thank you.
Hi, folks. Hello. So it's fantastic to talk to such a packed room. Great job to the organizers, and thank you to everybody for coming. It was excellent. I think this really speaks to the moment that we're in which there really is a sense of a pretty widespread, widely accepted sense that jail expansion and prison expansion are the wrong things for us to spend our monies on. So not only did we do a lot of things tactically and strategically, but we were helped by some larger contexts and outside events and processes. So let me tell you a little bit about a couple of those. First of all, we had a bunch of support from other activist groups in other parts of the country. So just as we're hoping to invigorate your struggle here, we were supported by other anti-jail fights, one in Suffolk County, New York. We were connected to the national grassroots organization Critical Resistance. About a dozen of us went to Oakland for the 10th anniversary conference of Critical Resistance, met a number of folks, including some Illinois people from, for example, your TAMS 10 campaign against the TAMS units. And We ran into also the work of other activists. I say we ran into it. We weren't exactly working alongside other activists, but the ACLU had a lawsuit, a successful lawsuit against our local jail based on conditions complaints. And it had set a cap on the number of people in the jail. And the sheriff was having to wrestle with this cap regularly. So the ACLU's work before us had set up this kind of crisis moment in which there had to be a decrease in jail population. There had to be something that happened. And that was both bad because it suggested to some people that there should be a new jail built, and good because it was pressure for shrinking the jail population. So, and of course, then there were national and statewide contexts. There was our very conservative governor, Mitch Daniels, was convinced by, among other things, the fiscal crisis, yes, that Indiana prison populations needed to decrease. And the Pew Center on the States issued a report about justice reinvestment for many states, including Indiana, but there was one specific to Indiana, encouraging local communities to find ways to decrease the pressures on their local criminal justice systems and on the state criminal justice systems by shrinking the population in their jails and investing that money that they would otherwise have spent on the jail in alternatives to incarceration. So this was actually, these were proposals accepted by some fairly conservative and powerful politicians in the state. And of course, you know, the fiscal crisis, which is ongoing, and I understand you guys have a slightly different political context here. You have a small minority of Republicans on the county board, and fiscal arguments are always good with Republicans. So the final result and some of the lessons learned. The jail did not get built. It's off the table. And I think in this there are lessons to be learned for campaigns against jails, and there are lessons to be learned for cities and towns, for the communities. So first for the activist lessons, the lessons for campaigns. First of all, you can convince politicians through sustained engagement. So through going to the county council meetings in Monroe County regularly and with articulate engagement, the politicians there began to take us seriously. And here you already have an incredible ally on the county board and soon to be in an aldermanic district. So you clearly have an in to politicians here. You have politicians' ears, and you will be able to change people's minds with your arguments. The other thing, lesson for campaigns is that it is possible to challenge the common sense that cages make us safer. There is, as I think I've said, there is a growing current of understanding that prison expansion is not the way to deal with the things that make us afraid. And the other insight for campaigns is that winning this fight leads to other wins. Because when you successfully prevent your county from building this jail, then they will have to deal with the pressures on the current jail. And then you can put pressures on them to decrease the population in the local jail through very obvious and simple decarcerative measures like the ones that we proposed in this pamphlet, which speaks to each branch of our county system and tells them little and things that they can do immediately to decrease the population. So, for example, to let nonviolent offenders out on their own recognizance instead of charging them bail. And guess what? The judges in Monroe County decided to do that in September of 2011. And so the pressure that we put on them to decrease the jail population by refusing to let them build another jail then made them take some of the suggestions that really people outside the jail came up with when we were talking to them during visiting hours during our campaign. So lessons for communities, basically, that jail doomsdayism is usually wrong. The idea that the jail is on its last legs and can't possibly survive and needs just to be replaced. Usually the jail building can simply be, you can fix the air conditioning, you can get rid of the leakage, and you can get the exterminator in there to get rid of the rats. And that's what I'm talking about. So jails, they don't get stale, right? They don't have half-lives. And that usually what's wrong with them is they're overcrowded. So I understand that your jail is not full to capacity, but nonetheless, if population were decreased, there would be more funds, more resources available for other kinds of measures that could, more programming in the jail and for the kinds of repairs that people think they don't have the money to do here. So, and then once you decrease the jail more, and when you save all the money that would have gone to the new building, then you can put those monies towards the millions of things that actually make people's lives safer and that are way cheaper than building a new jail and have terrific collateral consequences for the community. They don't tear apart the social fabric as prisons and jails do, and they leave us with net increase in health and happiness for all.
Did you turn your mic off yet? All right. So Lindsay, I think, is going to answer questions when it's time to answer questions. She's not going to be a part of this presentation, I don't think. Sister Carol has asked me to come back to her before we go to Rachel. Sister Carol.
I just wanted to, for myself, I'm just meeting these wonderful people today. And so not only did I not give them the script, I didn't share any information with them specifically about our jail nor our conditions. However, I find some real striking similarities. One, I wanted to point out the striking similarity as we went back, and we have an excellent research team. I really want to, I know they don't like to do this, but I'm going to say Chris Evans and James Kilgore, who are great researchers. But with just a little precursory look into some archival research on News Gazette articles prior to my time here in this community, you'll find that the arguments that were argued back when they were trying to build and expand in '86 are the same arguments that are being offered today. And similarly, you'll find that the argument of the HVA system, the pipe leaking, and the rodents seem to be taking center stage to us building this astronomical, or even using, or even suggesting to use anything close to what we're being asked to spend to expand this jail system. I think it's really a clear picture that this is a systemic problem. And as I looked at LA County, as I looked at DeKalb, as I looked at Memphis, as we looked at other communities, you saw some similarities to the argument as to why you should build. Either it was overcrowding or it was facility issues. Well, it's too old, or the locks can't be replaced. But we have facilities much older than the one that we have here in Champaign County. I also wanted to draw the attention and really encourage the citizens, because political bodies will only do what the citizens make them do. I think that is a position that FDR said too when he was the president. You got to make me do whatever you want me to do. Now, what does that mean? If we really want to deal with current conditions of our jail, then the question seems to me that we should be asking, what are you doing to fix the current conditions? And unfortunately, that's not the conversation that's really taking center stage in the county discussions at this point. But we need to make it center stage so that if there's a rodent issue, we should have had extermination that started back in October. But I haven't seen any actual record of extermination since October, since this issue came to the public view. If it's pipes, I hope they're not leaking still, but I haven't seen the report that says we've already addressed the leaking pipes issue, so that we can separate this discussion. And I'll close with this. Strikingly similar is this concept of campus, this campus concept. Let's move everything to the county campus and put this great initiative of county campus together. Again, the public has to ask the question, we're 5 minutes from the next facility, so we need to spend $20 million plus to make that more convenient and put it all on the county campus. Those are decisions that will be made in your interest by people that you should be talking to, because you should be talking to them about why you would want to take that money instead of using it for the alternatives that we can expand in our mental health systems, in our mental health court, in our drug courts, where we should be looking at expansion opportunities there. We're talking about facility expansions instead of those things that really improve the lives and the conditions of people. And so I'll leave that and shift back to Dr. Rachel Schwartz. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to totally shift gears and talk about financial aspects, which are not any more important, but that's what I know about. So let me talk about that. So I'll start from the end conclusion. My conclusion, having looked at the numbers, and I'm talking now about numbers coming from the county administrator, Deb Busey, who provided a funding model, proposed funding model, after county board members asked her for that. So this is not based on my assumptions in any way. This is simply her numbers, is that there is no way to build a jail or anything really of a $20+ million without increasing property taxes. Okay, so that's the conclusion now. For those of us who want to have increased property taxes, I think we're fine financially. The rest of us, I don't think people are happy about. People in Champaign County, as it is, complain about having excessive property taxes, and we all know about the school board coming with more and so on. Okay, one thing that I've heard when I first heard about the jail expansion came from county board members, and that's the perception that we do have a public safety sales tax, like Carol mentioned. It is paying currently for the courthouse, the juvenile detention center, but we're going to be done paying by 2015. So in 2015, this money is going to free up. We'll be able to borrow against that money and build the jail with nobody's going to feel anything. Well, that's not true. Okay, if you go to the county budget and look at the discussion of debt, we borrowed in 1999 about $24 million for the courthouse and juvenile detention center. We still owe now $21 million just on that alone. So in 13 years, we didn't really pay much principal. We probably paid interest, but we never really decreased the principal. So the short version, if you look at juvenile detention center, courthouse, as well as the bell and clock tower, we owe about $30 million today. Those are payments that are scheduled through 2029. And with interest, we're talking roughly about $50 million. So the concept that money is going to free up is just factually not correct. I looked at what we can do in terms of revenues coming from the safety sales tax, which are about $4.5 million a year this year with some increases, relative to the current debt payments, again, coming from Deb Busey's projections of her knowledge of current debt payments, plus additional debt payments on a $20 million loan. And if you don't know, the other part of safety sales tax is used to pay for operating costs of the courthouse and other justice system operations, which was not the initial intent of paying just for construction bond. So when I look at those numbers, and again, not adding any of my assumptions, simply taking the revenues as projected by Deb Busey minus the cost of the debt we know about and the cost of what is projected to be on the $20 million, we simply come short. There isn't almost any year where the revenues are sufficient to cover all these costs. And this is assuming that we're going to stay within $20 million. I don't think, based on other estimates we've heard, that that's really realistic. And so the public safety sales tax that currently has a $4 million balance is going to be drained to about zero by 2017. And this is even though the new debt will not be able to pay anything other than interest until 2020. So even if all you're paying is interest, you're going to be exhausting the existing fund way before you start paying principal. This is even worse than what it sounds like, because right now the county uses that fund balance to borrow from. And so just a month ago, the county had to borrow for the general corporate fund. They have to borrow from that fund balance to bridge the gap of cash flows until people pay their property taxes. So draining this to zero is not really something that would even work today. And going into a $2 million deficit definitely is not possible. Last thing I wanted to say, I believe that in Monroe County, one of the things that was helpful is that they changed the laws and you had to put this whole question on the ballot. I'm not sure that we will even get to vote on such a property tax increase. Again, this is not something that ever came out clear in the board discussion, but about 2 months ago, the county board voted to abate taxes, meaning property taxes that have been levied before the safety sales tax and others were approved. And so right now, and I remember Carol Ammons asking Deb Busey, what happens if we vote not to abate it? And the answer was, well, it will simply kick in because those taxes have been levied. And so we're talking several million additional, between 5 to 9 million every year. And so it appears to me, and I'm not a legal expert by any means, but from my observation, that nobody would be asked to vote on that, none of us. And I don't even think that any county board members will have to vote for it, because simply by not voting to abate taxes, they're there by default. So it's really important that whatever it is we think we want to do with the jail, you can't just wait until it's on the ballot and then we're going to make known what we think about it, because it's not going to be on the ballot. Thank you.
A nice round of applause for all of them, please, for all of them and for everything that they offered. I would like to make note that there are a couple of county board members in the house. I see Patsy Petrie back there. The chair of the county board, Pius Weibel, is back there. Shake him, y'all. Is he woke? Oh, okay. I see you, Pius. A couple of things I'd like to, so I've learned a lot already just in this from all of you. Even learned something from this lovely lady in the middle here that I didn't know, right? One thing that I would like to share with with all of you and with the viewing audience is that there's a reason why this is on television. We know that everyone can't be out at all the county board meetings, but with this public access, and I believe it was Judah, you said something about access in particular, that people said that access to power was one of the things that made them feel safer. And I just think it's extremely important, and I love living in the city of Urbana because of this very reason. This public access channel allows you, the viewers, and all of us who are in the audience tonight to have this sort of access. It is our voice in various different ways. So I think that as we think about this, we want to make sure that we applaud and secure that this type of access is available so that we can get information out to the public that they wouldn't normally get. So that's one thing. Yeah, definitely. And so big ups to Jason and Jake, who are behind the scenes back there. Also, something else that came up was the community radio. 104.5 WRFU, 90.1 FM, WEFT, 1580 WBCP. We're able to use these airwaves to get information out. So I'm asking to sort of issuing somewhat of a challenge to all those who are watching to make sure you're tuning into these stations so that you can get other information that you wouldn't get from some of the more commercial channels or places like that, or radio stations that are not allowed to give you this sort of access. So I really appreciate that. And the last thing is that the conversation amongst friends that you talked about, Judah, very much reminded me of about the beginnings of CUCPJ. CU Citizens for Peace and Justice was founded in just that same way at a breakfast location on campus with Danielle Chenoweth and Aaron Ammons and Carol Ammons and Kim Cranick and a undercover sister who will forever remain undercover. So I just wanted to say this to you all, to the listeners, to the viewers. I'm used to being on the radio, because we shouldn't minimize the importance of these things, of WEFT, BCP, RFU, public access. We need to use them more often. So I just wanted to get that in while I had a chance. So I guess at this point we wanted to...
were we going to have the presentation of our survey at all?
If you allow me to MC, yes, ma'am, I certainly will. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank
you. At this point, Rachel, from the Planners Network, what I believe would come up and share some information with us about the survey, because I think it was Aaron Marshall who spoke about going out and educating the public and finding out what people really wanted. And I would indeed second that motion that Chris Evans and James Kilgore and all of the committee for CUCPJ, the jail committee that's been meeting every Friday for over a year. And I think it was Danielle who said, hey, y'all don't sleep on this issue, and pushed us to start getting involved in it. So we want to applaud the entire team who has done everything that they do as individuals to make this happen, regardless of what other people might think of us. All right.
Is this on? Yeah, I think it is. Okay. I think it's on. It's on. Okay. Thank you, and I would just like to say welcome to our visitors tonight. Welcome to Champaign Urbana. Really what I want to talk about is a survey that we conducted over a course of 3 weekends, 3 Saturdays, 2 in April and 1 just this past Saturday. And it was a group of volunteers through Citizens for Peace and Justice, as well as other organizations in the community, and Planners Network, which I am part of, as well as some other students that are here as well. It is a student organization from the University of Illinois. And really what the survey was about was we were wanting to just get out there and get people's reaction or perceptions of public safety in the community. And so we got about 127 responses, or we actually talked to 127 people from their homes. So we conducted surveys in District 7 and District 10, which includes the urbanized areas of Champaign and Urbana. And the reason we wanted to just survey these districts first was just to get a general large response. It's our largest urbanized area of the county, and to just get different backgrounds. So we weren't really targeting any particular population. It was somewhat of a random survey. So we just knocked on the door. If people were willing to answer and conduct the survey, then we went forth. There were 5 survey questions. They were very they were open-ended, so this gave an opportunity for people to speak in their own voice. And it was really kind of started out general about how people felt about spending $20 million in general, and what their first priority would be. And then we also talked about or asked questions about how they felt about spending $20 million specifically on the jail and other things that would make them safe in the community. We have some preliminary findings. Planners Network has been entering the data and doing some synthesis of the data. We do have some preliminary findings. We are hoping to have a final report that will be released sometime soon, and hoping that this would inform us as we move throughout the campaign. And so just to give you some general observations about what we found thus far is in the question when we ask how people felt about or what they would like to spend $20 million on or what they thought was their priority, it ranged from health services to basic infrastructure needs, but really the greatest response we had was education, about 27%. Then the second question kind of focused more in about how that money should be spent, or if that money was spent, should the voters of Champaign County be able to vote on it, and that was an overwhelming response of 80%. The third question was more specifically about the jail and what they thought about spending $20 million of taxpayers' money on the jail, and if they felt that was a good use for taxpayers' money. And 30% said no or not a good use of money, and then 21% indicated that they needed actually more information to even answer the question, because there was a lot. What we found throughout the survey was a lot of people weren't aware of this issue, and so that's something that we're definitely going to, I think, talk about more. The fourth question was just in general, what makes you feel more comfortable or more safe, or makes you feel safe in the community or in our community? And most of the response was that they already felt safe, and that there wasn't really anything that was going to make them feel safer. There was some response about police patrol and street lighting. Question number 5 was, it was an opportunity for them to talk a bit more about the issue, or if there was anything else they wanted to discuss. Most people didn't have a response, or they ranged from everything from maybe they wanted to elaborate from a previous question. So that's really what we've done at this point. We are hoping to move this forward, and we will probably expand into different districts, and we'll have a final report of our information. So.
I would take this opportunity to make sure that we say a special thanks to the Planners Network, GEO, and I'm just saying those particular organizations at this particular point to just highlight the importance of student involvement. We have emeritus professors in the audience, in the front row and all over the place, but the professors who urge their students and give them more of a holistic experience at the University of Illinois and at Parkland by bringing them into the fold and allowing them to get involved in community issues and seeing how people really live and survive on the ground. I think it really gives them a different, a complete perspective and really rounds out their education experience at the University of Illinois and at Parkland. So I really appreciate the Planners Network and their involvement, the GEO, and their involvement, and so many students to name. I won't try to start doing that right now, but I really appreciate, we all really appreciate what you bring to the table. Can they get a round of applause? Yes, definitely. And we hope that that will turn into high school involvement at Central and Centennial and Urbana and places like that, so they get more involved as well in the issues that are directly affecting them. A broader thank you goes out to the Catholic Worker House for the food donations. Can they get some love, right? Thank you. Somewhat of a shameless plug for Citizens with Conviction, a newly formed organization that is dealing with the issues facing people who have felony convictions in particular, but also even misdemeanor convictions. Myself as a president, Talib and Gregory Hayes is the vice president, and Snow Leopard, who helped with the graphics for tonight's event. So we want to give them big ups and much love to CWC. And just wanted to make sure that people were aware of where you can really hear more about what's going on. If it's not on the public access channel, you can tune in to WEFT on Saturday mornings from 8 to 10 a.m. You might hear Brother A-Dub and Sister Carol, or you might hear Eunice Buckner Boone, who's somewhere around here. I think I see her back there. But you can get more information about what's going on here locally. Also, Sister Carol and I host the third Saturdays at WBCP 1580 AM, the third Saturday of Straight Talk Live, and we also discuss the issues that are happening here locally so that we can continue to raise the awareness of what's going on. So I want to make sure that the viewers know when they can get more information. Yes. Sister Carol.
I just want to say that you see this number, $20 million, right? That's not a real number, right? That's a number that came from some estimations as we did a FOIA. It's actually $22 million that was estimated by Ms. Busey in her FOIA document between her and the sheriff discussing this issue. But we know that that's just a bottom line, rough in the park, not operational, cost included kind of number. So when you start talking about this issue, these are not conclusive. I encourage and employ people to say that we just won't build another jail. We're not going to. In 1996, they said we weren't going to build any more jails. We were done with that. We got it all figured out. So here we are talking about building another jail. The public should simply say we won't build another jail. Now let's talk about these alternatives. And the greatest issue that is, I really appreciate from Decarcerate Monroe is their name, Decarcerate. There is a clear trend across this country that I think Aaron does this very well, is say if we keep graduating 1,000 law students every year, where are they all going to work? The question is, if we keep incarcerating more and more people, where are we going to put them? ultimately you can't build your way into some heaven where you just got enough beds and that's enough. That's not exactly how it works. The more the state legislature, certainly for Illinois, makes things criminal, like we've just done this year, adding 200 new laws that were crimes, at some point everything becomes criminalized, and then you will find yourself spending all of your revenue trying to figure out how to incarcerate them as opposed to how to decarcerate your communities. And I think this is a great silver lining moment for Champaign County to look at ways to change the direction that we're traveling in and not allow the small issues of facility issues, which I believe our building looks beautiful on the outside, that's for sure. And certainly if you have not had an opportunity to look at the building, we received pictures directly from our sheriff. Thank you, Sheriff Walsh, for sending the pictures to our member, Durrell Cruz, and he put them up as he received them, and you can see for yourself the kind of repairs that are needed for our downtown jail. And unfortunately, in my opinion, they do not reach the level of demolishing. So we need to really have that discussion. At this point, I think we're going to have question and answers, and then we'll close out.
So anyone from the audience who want to come and pose a question or make a statement, you can ask questions to decarcerate folks, to decarcerate Monroe. Someone, please come up to the microphone.
Thank you all for your comments and information that you've shared with us. You shared with us in Monroe County the fact that you were able to stop them from building a jail. Can you tell us, as of 2012, exactly what is the jail situation now? What does it look like? Do you have all kinds of issues and problems because they didn't build a new jail? What replaced the campus in terms of the jail proposal and the issues that surrounded that? So can you tell us what it looks like today in Bloomington? Thank you.
Guess what? It didn't implode. It's still there. And some of the same problems persist. We continue to fight to decrease the population so that they can address issues of overcrowding. Some things happened that were good. The sheriff voluntarily extended the cap that the lawsuit had enforced on him, because of course the sheriff wants his jail to work, right? He doesn't want people dying from overcrowding related medical issues. So he actually requested that the cap be imposed upon him for another year, keeping the population down. The judges did their part. They decided that they could let people charged with nonviolent offenses out. We continue to work against, in particular, non-enforcement of Indiana's law against public intoxication. So I don't know if you have this here, but this is really amazing. In Indiana, it's illegal to be drunk in public. So it's not illegal to be drunk, right, for people who are over age, and it's not illegal to be in public, but you put the two together, and all of a sudden it's illegal. So it turns out that 36% of the people in our jail are arrested for public intoxication. Absolutely ridiculous. And we've been fighting to figure out that number for at least 4 years. We've been asking for statistics on why people are in. And all of a sudden, just recently, the local newspaper released the jail's figures about the top 10 reasons for arrest. So now we know 36% of people are in there for public intoxication. So it's once again another fantastic piece of information that we can use in our fight to get them to continue to decrease the population overall.
Before people start peeling off after they've eaten all the food, we are grassroots organizers, so we need, we don't have sponsors and big donors and stuff to help us make things happen. So as we continue to try to put on events like this or to bring people in to help offset their expenses and stuff like that, we would really, really appreciate it if we could pass our hat and and bowl around or whatever if you'd like to make a donation to help us further our cause and the work that we're working on. Please feel free to do so. There's got to be more. Please come on up here and ask your questions and make your statement.
If I can add something
Okay,
very
Aaron,
quickly
please have a
to
seat, though. Aaron would like
what
to add
Nicole was
something.
just talking about. One of the groups of folks that was interested in having a new jail is a group that works inside the jail offering services to folks that are incarcerated, and that's New Leaf, New Life. And the reason that they were interested in that is that they wanted more space for programming. And since the jail has not been built, New Leaf, New Life has actually acquired a space that they are able to operate in outside of the jail where they are able to assist folks who are getting out. So they're helping people with material things, they're helping folks get clothes and just things that they need to survive on a regular, daily basis. They're also helping people to find jobs and housing and those sorts of things. And the space that they're in is actually a space that is being donated to them for free by one of our city trustees. So that is actually money that is still coming from the government, but it's being used in a different way. And they're being able to offer these services to folks who are getting out, and they're still offering programming on the inside.
I have one question, and I think I also want to answer the question, what would make me feel more secure in the community? And to me, things that make me feel secure in the community is access to education for everyone, access to health care, and jobs. And these are the most important things that actually help all of us. It benefits me to have my neighbors educated and with jobs and access to health care. So those are the big three things for me. And I think that's, I've heard that answer also in the survey too, and that was not represented in like 30% or anything. But I just wanted to say that those things are really important to me to feel secure and not incarcerating my neighbors for any reason. The one thing I wanted to ask, and maybe this is for Rachel, I'm not sure, could the county be held liable for the misuse of the funds that have been used so far? Because, originally the vote was for that the quarter-cent tax was going to be used for a specific thing, and it looks like it has been expanded and used in ways that it was not originally voted on by the people. And who would that be if someone was going to sue the county? Who would it be that would? Okay, all right.
Well, the short version is no, and I think even Chris Evans came back with why it was presumably not legal to begin with to have a sunset at the time, or at least, I don't know if not legal, but wasn't really within the purview of the county board to even say it was. Now, on the ballot itself, it never really said it has a sunset. It was marketed heavily as having a sunset. This is what people were told. It's only for the bonds. As soon as we're done paying the bonds, it will sunset. But on the ballot itself, it never said that.
Wow.
Now, I think another point of that is looking at how the 1999 debt was almost not paid down at all. Even if you would have had a sunset, since you have a choice of how you structure your payments, you can probably postpone forever paying down the principal, just keep paying the interest. And so, so that's just how else you can circumvent the voters' intent. So it
sounds like if I were to pay off my credit card bill, just the minimum amount every time, that's exactly what the county is doing.
Well, they're doing a little bit more. But
more.
Pretty much, yes. They're not paying the interest.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. And the other point that I think they were making, though, is if we repeal that tax, you still have to pay for those bonds and other operating costs, so that would mean increasing property taxes. And they said those have been levied between those two votes, where the first one where the voters said no, those taxes were levied as property taxes, which is one of the reasons the second time around people were more happy to say, okay, yeah, let's do sales tax, and other people from other county who come to shop here will pay for my expenses. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
And if I can follow up. Okay.
I just had one question. Not a question. It is a question, but it's something for clarity for myself and for the other viewers, and I do this all the time. I don't know exactly what levied means. So if you could clarify.
Well, I think it's the legal term for putting taxes on you, saying this, the county board passing a resolution and saying, we're going to tax you. So, thank you.
And if I can just follow up right quick, so it's been put out in the public sphere. There on the ballot, that's correct. There was never a discussion about sunsetting anything. They could not put that on the ballot at that time legally to say we were going to sunset that. That's not ever happened. What was happening was a campaign to get the quarter cents passed, which had failed in '97. Well, they discussed it and said the only way to get it past the voters is to say in '98 that it won't be a forever tax. I don't know which voters buy that, but Champaign County bought it and made this forever tax, which they passed in '98 and have expanded its use by the legal responsibility and authority of the Champaign County Board, who passes resolutions and ordinances, and they have the legal right to do that. So in this case, is it illegal? No. Is it questionable in the face of a voter who believes they're voting on one thing and then get something else? I think the voters will have to make that determination.
They were bamboozled. That's what it was.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I have a question and an observation. I don't know what our law is on people being intoxicated in public. I don't think that's a major issue for us, though it could be. But there are two segments of the jail population that I find very troubling in this area. One of them is people with mental illness, mental health issues. We know that this is a substantial population in the jail. We know that there are two people on staff at the jail, two women who are hired to deal with some of those issues, but they themselves said that they are not in a position to give any treatment to people. It's simply crisis intervention that they engage in. And I think that certainly some of the funds, perhaps not $20 million, that's a scary amount of money, could be thought of, and it would be a matter of public safety, to construct some kind of facility and staff that facility with people who could offer treatment to people rather than imprison people. A second population are poor people who get in trouble because they violate city ordinances. They then go to city court, which you may not have it in Indiana. I know in Pennsylvania they don't have any such thing. But they go to city court where they are levied fines that can be rather substantial, sometimes in the hundreds of dollars. They don't pay those fines. They are brought back into court and they are found guilty of contempt and do not pass go to jail if you are found guilty of contempt. But it's because they cannot afford to pay these fines. So I don't know if you have anything comparable. You might speak to that indigent people on rather trivial kinds of matters that are city ordinances. There, of course, I think what we have to have is a community-wide, and I'm talking about the whole county here, discussion of the first of all, the nature of some of these ordinances that people get snared for. For example, your car radio being too loud, which is actually quite common among certain segments of our population. They get snared in that one. But I think we need to have a county-wide discussion where the county needs to speak to the city and say, one, you've got too many trivial ordinances. Your fines are far too high because most of the people, I've been in a number of these city courts of Champaign, and 3/4 of the people sitting there are African American. And I have been also in the city court when people are brought from the jail. They say, well, you don't really go to jail for violating a city ordinance. And that's true. But you do go to jail for the contempt issue. And I've been there when people have been brought in chains from the jail to have their hearing in the city court. I really think what we need is a much broader discussion in this county about the whole criminal justice system, the way it works, the effect it has on real people's lives, the effect it has on the county financially. That needs to be a much broader discussion. And I would surely hope that our county board members who are here have listened carefully tonight about what was said and give serious thought to this. And I would hope Rachel would make contact with some of the Republicans on there whom you would think would be interested in the fiscal aspect of this. But many of them I know are inclined to go ahead and spend that kind of money. So if you have any response to what I've just said coming from your position, I'd appreciate it.
I think that you bring up a couple of really good points. Particularly for us in our community, I think a way that we can relate that is, we do have 39% of our arrests made for public intoxication. We have another 4% for marijuana possession. So that's that's 43% of the folks that we're arresting, and we're spending 59% of our county budget on operating a justice system. So think of how much money we could save if we quit charging people for public intoxication and marijuana possession. And then that money can be redirected to things like mental health services. And I'm sure that there are probably organizations in your community, I know that there are organizations in ours that deal with, folks who need those services, even if, they're not able to afford it. And if we redirected some of that money to support those organizations, then we could actually serve folks in our community. Also, we have a lot of folks who are arrested for public intoxication who are homeless. And so, of course, they're drunk in public. If they're drinking, that's where they're going to be, because we don't have enough shelters for folks. And so if we were, again, able to redirect some of that money into funding shelters and into helping with things like education, which you said like 29% of folks on your survey, I think, some, astronomical number like that, said that's what we want our money to be spent on. If we, if we put our money into things like education and making sure that folks have jobs and all of that, then that makes a huge difference. That solves a lot of our problems right there, I think.
Can I say one? There are two things that struck me about your comments that are really important, I think, to point out. One is, you brought up that this is a city ordinance, and I think something that we encountered a lot was folks sort of passing the buck when we were like, this is a serious problem. People would say, and by people I mean sort of judges and politicians and things like that would say, well, this is a state issue over which we have no control. It's a state law, we're just enforcing the law. Well, if it's a city ordinance, you actually do have some control over it, and that to me is a great place to start, especially if it has this pretty obvious effect, and if it's sort of, emblematic of a larger problem. It strikes me as a great place to start. The other thing you said, which I think is also really a good strategic intervention, is to frame it in a much larger conversation. So you're making this very specific, very local change, or talking about making that change, but also having a much larger conversation around it. And something that we encountered that was arguably one of the hardest things for us was all of the people who were pushing the Justice Campus would in the same breath, literally, say things like, I'm trying to think of the direct quote for you. It's slipping my mind, but they would use the term prison industrial complex. They would speak out very polemically, very politically against the prison industrial complex, and yet in the same breath then turn around and endorse the Justice Campus. And I think it's really strategically important to say the prison industrial complex, or mass incarceration, whatever you want to call it, we tend to talk about it as if it's somewhere else. It's in California, it's in Texas, it's New York, whatever. It's right here, it's in your county, it's in Bloomington, right? I mean, this is it. This is the fight. And so I think it's really important to both frame things very locally, things that over which you have some control, and yet locate that as part of this much larger story, which you're inevitably a part of.
I'm sorry, sir. Can I just say one more thing about this previous comment, which was very full? I think the thing I want to pick up on what you said is your point about court costs and the ways that they snowball. And sometimes we call these domino charges, or, there's a kind of a slippery slope for poor people into the prisons because of the ways the fees mount up. And there's a kind of Einsteinian relativity between the fees and jail time. So either you can pay the fees or you can do the jail time. And for poor people, both of them just start building up and up and up. You owe more and more and more. You're jailed more and more and more. So there's something called cash bond in our community, where people are charged money in case they're guilty when their cases begin. And then there are all the fees they have to pay for. They have court fees. They have to pay for their own. They have to pay if they're on home arrest. They have to pay for their own drug tests. They have to pay for their probation officers for their phone calls and so on. So there are a million different ways in which they are charged. Their accounts, their debts, their deficits are just mounting all the time. And if people are also being impoverished by being jailed and they lose their jobs, by the way that jail tears at the fabrics of social relations that allow people to draw on others, on their loved ones for financial support, then they find themselves more and more impoverished and more in jail. And so some of the ways to immediately help poor people not go to jail are just end the system of charging them for their own court fees, end the system of charging them for piss tests, for urine analysis for drugs. Just finish
You said it right.
Just stop charging those fees, and then people will not get into this domino slippery slope kind of relativity effect.
Please, sir, go right ahead.
Before this meeting started, I happened to talk to the mayor, and we had a conversation about how the $20 million could be spent, and she said 100% kids going to Head Start. And that's about money instead of incarceration for early education. And that'd be a good way for the money to be spent. But I'm sitting here, and I really want our county board member, both of them, the one was running and the one that said as county board member, to talk about this quarter-cent sales tax, how the people actually did not come out and talk about it, and about this quarter sales tax, how when you don't talk about it and discuss it, that you're paying for it every time you go out and buy something, your phone bill you pay on it, just all the time, the money that you spend, you're paying that quarter sales tax towards the jail, in which you want to invest in education and instead of in incarceration, because I've been all through the community talking about this, and I just wish the community would come out, and wish all the churches talk about, make it educational, because we don't need no jails. We need more education, more social things in our community to help people. Jail is not helping anyone, and it's need more education than more incarceration. That's all I want to say.
Carol, did you want to respond?
I did want to go. I will talk about the quarter cents just for a second, but I wanted to go back to a statement that was said previously that, similarly to your experience, the proponents of the earlier attempt and push to build a jail in our community were Democrats. And the proponents here largely are Democrats that are moving this agenda. And many of them have expressed issues that chimed in on the humanitarian discussion as well that you guys experienced in Bloomington, Indiana. I wanted to say that because first and foremost, the Democratic platform, as you all know, usually are for programming, social services, opportunities for people to improve their lives and livelihoods, and to incarcerate only those that really, really need to be incarcerated for violent offenses. But we've moved in a prison industrial complex, which we don't like to use that word, because Champaign County is not involved in the prison industrial complex. We here don't incarcerate people that shouldn't be incarcerated. But what was very clear, as you have public intoxication at 36%, we also have nonviolent offenders at about 23%, according to the NIC report that we received right in this community. And those people are there on driving without a license, You have small possession charges. So you have these nonviolent offenses that pile up all of these fees and fines that we have here, as well as add this time because you don't pay the fines and fees, you actually get time for that. And that just implodes our criminal justice system. But nobody cares about that. Let's talk about the issue of facilities only. Because we want to run away from the reality of people's lives are impacted. We have people who are victims that are impacted. We have people who become the victims ultimately for bad decision making that also become impacted. But the facility itself could technically be reduced in size, not expanded. We have no numbers since the last 5 to 10 years that said that we were overpopulated, because our justice system has done an excellent job decreasing the number of people that are incarcerated. Our judges, our state's attorney work to decrease our population. And because of that decrease, we've been able to keep those numbers down. So why would we expand something that actually we don't really need to expand, but we need to expand the programs that actually help people's lives, like the mental health court and those things that are already implemented in our county. So I just wanted to say that this movement is usually from Democrats against their own platform. That's the interesting thing, from Democrats against their own platform, and the Republican platform that's usually quite fiscally conservative are absolutely usually free to build jails and incarcerate more people. Why? Because it's something called prison profiteers. People make money off of this. And we ain't gonna make any money in Champaign County, but in other places, all of the research that the University of Illinois, Indiana University do is around this issue of spending money through this incarceration system, and people actually build their businesses and make money off of building these kind of government buildings. And so we don't want to talk about that. That is why I think Professor Field's statement says we need to talk about this in a greater context, not just a facilities issue. This is not just whether we have pipes leaking. This is who's actually in jail. I'll just say this, I attempted to get the number of people based on race and demographics of who was in jail as of February of 2012 and could not get the racial demographics. I'll go to the quarter cents briefly that Rachel described. The quarter cent sales tax has been used in many ways to support the criminal justice complex system power bill, certainly beyond the scope that the voters originally asked for, but the county board does have the authority to expand its scope, which it did by ordinance, to utilize the money in the way that it's currently being used. Now, the question is, can the county board change that? Can they change that? That's a question to you all. Yes. Yes, because the county boards pass laws and ordinances. They can change how and shift revenue however they so choose. So if we want to spend more of the quarter cents on prevention, we can by resolution.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing that in 2003, when that quarter cent tax was both expanded but also used for other purposes, one good thing that came out of that is 5% of the proceeds of every year are dedicated to prevention and diversion. 5% being $200,000. And so while the state's attorney and others say, well, we're doing a lot for diversion and prevention, so on, I think we can do a little bit more than $200,000. And so since the county board passed the ordinance at 5%, you can probably change the distribution and put a little bit more into that and a little bit less into the justice system.
Before we move on, just a second, Jeremy. I wanted to make sure that what I think that I heard, also I'd like to respond to what Brother Martell was saying, is that to be clear to the viewers and the people who are not speaking out or who don't feel like they have the time, the energy, or the ability to come out and get involved, your silence is not the only thing that gives consent to this moving forward. What Brother Martell was saying is that every time you spend your money, you're going to give consent to this. So you should at least come out and get involved and make sure that your voice is heard and that your input is considered and that your opposition or support for it is very clear. So let's not make the roadblock or the excuse that we can't get to any meeting. we can get somewhere. You can send an email to your representative in your district. You can get a phone number. There's various different ways that you can reach out. And many of these county board members, whether they agree with you or not, you can at least say something to them. They are accessible. So we need, and you need, to make sure that you get your voice on record as to what you think should happen, and how your tax dollars should be spent, or your sales tax dollars should be spent. Please, Jeremy, go ahead.
Actually, that's very much what I want to talk about as well. You know, we have a number of county board members here tonight. I've seen Chris Alex, who is one of my representatives. We have Pius Weibel, the chair of the county board in the back there. We have Ralph Langenheim right over here, Patsy Petrie. These are members of the county board. They are the ones who are accountable for the whole situation we are dealing with tonight. Now, Patsy Petrie is an ally. Carol Ammons is an ally. These are people who are fighting against the county jail. The other people I pointed out have fallen on various sides of the line on various times since I've been following this. Now, one aspect of the county board meetings that a lot of people may not know about, because these meetings aren't very well attended, they aren't very well publicized, is that you can't ask questions of the county board. You can't ever ask questions, you can't ever answer into dialogue. And so I want to urge the people here today and the people watching at home to ask questions of the county board, demand accountability for these situations, these decisions that they've made, and by all evidence appear to plan to continue making. I have some questions, which I'm going to ask now. First of all, where's the transparency? The very first study session, January 31st, Carol Ammons asked, we need to have public meetings on what the community thinks about building a new jail. This is something we need. It has to be first priority. Never happened. It was never discussed after that, you know, other than Carol trying to bring it up. It was her requests for consideration of that as part of the planning process have thus far more or less been ignored. There's a short mention of possible engagement with the public in the RFP, but that still allows a lot of discretion. So where's the transparency? Also in the planning process up to this point has been carried out largely behind closed doors by the Jail Space Improvement Project planning team. Carol was appointed to that in early March, but the team was constituted in early February and wrote the entire RFP with the help of the Sheriff's Office staff, without the involvement of Carol. So those are a couple questions I have. I also found what you said, Judah, really resonated with me in terms of passing the buck. We've heard over and over and over again in the county board, we don't make the laws. We don't control who goes to jail. I want to know why is Chris Alex and Ralph Langenheim and Pius Weibel standing by and letting people say that we don't make the laws, we don't control who goes to jail, when DMC shows that there are ways that we can affect who goes to jail. You know, why are we passing the buck here? I think it's so we can maintain the status quo and enhance, or further the prison industrial complex. Finally, I also think that there's an issue of framing here, that somehow, the county board members have wondered at why people keep coming into public participation and talking about mass incarceration. You know, they keep saying, well, yeah, you're talking about mass incarceration, but this is really a facilities issue. I know Chris Alex says that. And the connections are so clear to some of us that these systems are continuous, that it's shocking to hear the reduction of such a complicated system to a quote-unquote facilities issue. And so, those are my questions and my observations, and I really hope that everyone here and watching at home will ask their own questions and draw their own conclusions and demand accountability from their representatives, their elected representatives on the county board.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
I'll just point out that also Alex Quisenberry is in the back, who's also on the county board.
Is this on?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
So, first off, I want to say it's difficult to be a public official. And I know that from personal experience. I also want to say that I believe in our county board because it was about, maybe there were folks, Patsy, no, who was on the board at this time? This group of folks, including CU Citizens for Peace and Justice, about 8 years ago, we brought forward an issue to our county board that the inmates were being gouged through prison phone contracts. And so at that time, we brought it to our county board, and the county board looked into the financial of the situation, the ethics of the situation, and they canceled that phone contract. 2 days from now, there is a national campaign for prison phone justice to call on the Federal Communications Commission to end this prison and jail phone contract system. They actually they will be pointing to our county and our county board as a model and example of how a group of people, grassroots citizens, can come together with elected officials to take a look at the issue, expose some of the ethical violations with that issue, and make fast and quick change. So I do believe in our political process and our county board here in Champaign County. And my gut instinct on this issue, this jail issue, is that we're not going to build. In fact, I've thought that for a long time. Every single time this comes up, and it has come up multiple times. I'm 40 years old this year, so I've seen it happen. Last 12 years or so, it has come up on a regular basis, and each time, the arguments are so clear against the expansion of the jail. And I think that Rachel actually has the smoking gun of tonight's presentation. Things I did not know before this presentation about the fact that the county has, did you say a $20 or $30 million debt load? Okay, so a $30 million debt load, that this idea that somehow the quarter-cent sales tax, that those issues are going to sunset, and so that money will be freed up for this jail, is actually a fallacy. In addition to the fact that the jail quarter-cent sales tax, there are real ethical issues about the fact that it's being continued without it coming to the voters. And the fact that basically we're looking at property sales tax increase. And folks who live in Urbana, and specifically, but also Champaign Urbana, we know that our property tax is intense in comparison to other counties and other communities. So I don't think we're going to get very far. I have 2 questions for the folks here. The first question is for our friends in Monroe County. The question I have is, my theory of change, it's not only my theory of change, but it's a theory of change I bring forward, is that the point of leverage on any issue like this is where the contradiction is. And so my question to the Monroe County folks is, where was that point of leverage that you pushed on? One way to answer the question is to say, what were the top 2 issues that really resonated with a lot of folks? Another way to answer the question is to talk about some contradiction in the system in your community that you could really expose through this process. So that was my question to you all. And then my question to Rachel has to do with, I haven't seen Deb Busey's report, but I'm curious if she estimated $22 million for this jail, which Ms. Hammonds has pointed out was an estimate. Did she show any projected income stream? Was she looking at property? Okay, so there wasn't we just were spending. We were actually looking at income in that projection. Okay. Yeah, so I was just wondering, what were the messages or what was the point of leverage for your campaign in Monroe County?
I'm really just reiterating some of what's been said, but I think that the campaign moved forward originally because people thought it was sort of a humanitarian thing to do, that we were going to make things better for people, that it was going to be better, that children would be closer to home. And I think those were the two sort of mentalities that needed to be changed and talked through. That perhaps cages wouldn't be humanitarian even if they were nicer, even if they weren't overcrowded. And in these dialogues, we sort of changed the terms of what humanitarian meant when we were talking about issues of incarceration. And I think the issue of children, to build a juvenile campus which we didn't have at the time and don't have currently, and this idea to keep kids at home was reiterated when we said, okay, we need to keep kids at home, not locked up and 5 miles from home. So I think those were sort of the spins that became really critical in the dialogues that we had, because there was this imagination that we were protecting children and that we were investing in humanitarian causes in the original promotion of the jail. And so those sort of contested moments became the moments that we had to reevaluate.
Okay, folks, we have about 15 minutes left, and I think there's a couple more people who like to make comments. Okay, and so Miko, please respond.
Well, it's not a response to that. I think Lindsay covered it, but I do want to say something to the county board members who are here tonight. Well, to Carol Ammon and Patsy Petrie, who are allies in this. Fight the good fight. You guys are amazing, and we need you desperately. But to the other county board members who are here tonight, I think you guys are doing something even more brave and exciting to me. You're here even though you are not convinced. It means your minds are open. You are interested. You want to hear what we all have to say, and I think that is a fantastic demonstration of your genuine democratic leanings. Thank you for being here.
And just, was there something else from you guys? No? Before it gets lost, there's something that Carol brought up earlier, and I think that the public needs to understand this, because some of the pushback that we've received throughout this process was that somehow we were ignoring the pain or the concerns of the people who are currently incarcerated in the downtown jail, right? What's being overshadowed by this proposal to build a new jail is the fact that Carol and many of us have been saying from the beginning, this process is not following a step-by-step process. Why don't we address the issues that are facing the current downtown jail so that the people who are inside the jail can have these humanitarian issues addressed? So there's very little conversation on the board level that we see. Maybe it's some of those private meetings that take place through emails and stuff that we don't hear about until we FOIA the information. But we don't hear what's taking place to address the issues of people who are currently incarcerated. So we don't want the public to receive us as if we don't care about the people who are currently incarcerated, because we definitely do, and we want to make sure that their issues and the concerns and the living conditions are addressed immediately. That's what we want, and then move on to any other discussions, but that's not happening. So that was extremely important to make sure that point gets out there, to make sure that point is clearly made. So ma'am, please go right ahead.
Okay. Eleanor Evans. I think it's real important to show the board alternatives. We've got Chestnut in Bloomington, which I think is pretty successful. They have a 30-day drug program, and then they go into residential treatment where they stay, I think it's about a year. They've helped them find employment, and they follow them for all that time. We have Human Services Council here where there are a lot of movers and shakers. I would like to see some of the board members show up at that to see what's really going on that's positive. And we have Community Elements, which is a mental health program, and the FACT program is really good. I've talked to the person that runs that. That could use money. They need to get in touch with that. The board people need to get in touch with these programs. I have a question. What about the women? I'm concerned about the separation of the women and the men in the prison, in the jail.
Can you expound on that? What do you mean?
Well,
what's your actual concern?
I've heard that, you know, you have to separate, you know, the women from the men in the jails. Are they thinking about doing that downtown? I mean, I don't
Well, they're
understand.
currently, the women are kept downtown currently in the downtown facility.
Okay.
And very few women, if any, would be kept at the satellite jail currently.
Okay.
It's usually just a male facility. The downtown facility, and I don't know what the current numbers are of the downtown, but it's usually the women are downtown. And these conditions that persist in the downtown can be addressed right now to redress the issues of the women that are there. But we've not gotten any actual concrete evidence that those issues that were initially brought up have been remedied.
Okay.
So that's really the concern that we currently have,
Okay.
is what's the remedy for the current conditions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I wanted to follow up a little bit on the
name and address, please. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. James Kilgore, General Delivery.
I wanted to follow up a little bit on the issue of the women in the downtown jail, because this is, when we talk about humanitarian issues, this is one of the things that's been brought out, is the fact that the women being held in the inferior conditions of the downtown jail is a major human rights issue and needs to be remedied. And as Aaron has said, as CUCPJ, we've always campaigned and acted in the interests of people who are incarcerated, but this is really a facilities issue. This is not a big complicated issue that can be resolved. If the issue is equity for women, then they can achieve what the sheriff calls sight and sound separation in the satellite jail, and women can be housed there along with men in the context of the existing legal constrictions and so forth. So I think there's some legitimate concerns that on the parts of some of the board members that this is a gender equity issue, and constructing a new jail is a move in the direction of gender equity, and I think that's wrong, and I think that you have some experience of that as well that you might want to speak to in Monroe County. But I want to link that to the other human rights issue, which is not a facilities issue, which is the issue of who's getting incarcerated in the county jail in Champaign. In terms of the bookings for the last 5 years, the bookings are 54.7% African Americans in a county with a population that's 12% black. So quite clearly, that's a huge discrepancy, and it's also reflected in the state of Illinois, where the figures are 15% and 58%. So and it's also reflected in TAMS, the maximum security facility. Mm-hmm. So this is not a technical issue. This is not a facilities issue. This is a big picture criminal justice issue of the kind that Belden Fields was talking about before. And part of the reason for looking at alternatives to incarceration, and I'm part of the task force under the Justice and Social Services Committee on the county board that's looking at alternatives, but part of looking at alternatives is dealing with that racial discrepancy in terms of who's being incarcerated. So I would encourage the county board members who are here to look carefully at a complete human rights picture and to look at this, and to also look very carefully at other cities such as Los Angeles and counties such as Winnebago County in Wisconsin, such as Suffolk in New York, and such as the city of New Orleans, which post-Katrina decided not to build a huge jail like the one they had before, because they looked seriously at alternatives to incarceration. So I'd like to hear specifically from the people from Monroe County about the issues of race and gender in your county and how you address them in your campaign.
I'll let you guys marinate on that for a minute, then we'll come back to it. I think it's a very relevant piece. One thing that we just wanted to respond briefly to Danielle's piece, because we worked on that campaign for the phone contract when Sandra Oden and some other folks brought the issue to CUCPJ. We worked on that issue, and it did take a breakthrough moment. I think I was speaking to one of the county board members and said that we realize that you all are human beings as well. You have lives, you have different things that you're doing, and we're just trying to contribute and be a part of this as responsible citizens. And I think that was a sort of breakthrough leverage, that contradiction or whatever that was taking place. And then things opened up, and we were able to get that done. And I was just sort of excited when I heard that Champaign County would be looked at as a model of how to move forward. So hopefully the legacy of some of these board members, they could look back and give themselves the opportunity for their legacy to be connected to something that was very progressive and not build a new jail, but actually look at the alternatives. So I just wanted to say I appreciated that being shared.
I also wanted to say that I'm glad James asked the question. Obviously, we know that more than 50% in almost every prison and jail in the whole entire country is filled with people of color, African Americans primarily, and then Latino people in those communities. And so this is a huge issue of racial disparity that persists. And certainly we would not talk about that in Champaign County. And even at the attempt to bring that forward from the political process, through the democratic political process in Champaign County, board members were offended by the idea that race existed in the jail and prison population. It's all about economics. It's pretty simple to me. The prison and jail system, both supply and demand, has grown exponentially because of the high profits that prisons and jails create. It's very simple. And who would sit on the sideline and watch their children largely receive not only felony convictions, which we could talk about in another forum, but be incarcerated for some of these minor violations that most people in the majority community, which is the white population, go home for? And so this is a reality that we have to really come to terms with, but because race is such a pseudo term, people don't like to talk about it, and so they build these campaigns around issues other than the racist policies that create them. That's the reality, and that's why prisons are full of black folks, because you're simply replacing a slave system with the prison system, and you create your economics on it. And so we can't talk about that. I'm not afraid to talk about it, and I would hope that other folks start getting some reality while you have 12% population and over 50% of your people incarcerated are African Americans. That is a reality.
Miko wanted to respond, I think, to James's question. Please go ahead.
Well, James, I can't speak statistically because that's been one of our fights to figure out, who's in the jail. And the jail claims that as a matter of privacy, they're not allowed to divulge those statistics. Then sometimes they tell us they don't keep the statistics, which we know is ridiculous. But certainly it's clear in Monroe County, as everywhere else, that the jail population concentrates young black and brown men. We know that the jail and prison systems are profoundly racist. And one of the ways that we are trying to fight the racism of the system is by fighting the discretion of police to act as they wish in the streets. Because when you give police discretion, for example, when you allow them to arrest people for public intoxication, which is basically a way of giving police discretion to arrest an enormously large population that they otherwise would have to be more creative in thinking of reasons to arrest, then you give them the discretion to act on their biases, which then are magnified at every other point throughout the system. But so we know that the jail and prison system is racist. We know that it primarily targets young black and brown men. And to that extent, we know also that it is sexist. It discriminates against men. It is profoundly sexist in that way. And so when we find people using women, or as in Monroe County, using children, youth, as an alibi for growing the system. We face the most profound hypocrisy of people speaking as if they were feminists or on behalf of children, when what they're actually doing is reinforcing a really profoundly sexist and racist system.
So our time is, we got 5 minutes left. Please go right ahead.
I'll try to be brief here. In the last year, I've been working like in Rantoul, Homer, Broadlands as a substitute teacher / teacher's assistant. And one of the things that kind of concerns me is I feel that school systems are actually criminalizing behavior that affects even young children. Like one thing I witnessed was a young black boy in Rantoul, about 6 or 7, picking at grass. And the recess supervisor started screaming at him, saying he was guilty of destroying state property. You know, now if the kid had been like spraying graffiti on the building, I would have seen that. But to me, you know, something as simple or as basic as picking up little blades of grass, to me that's not criminal behavior. Yet we're encouraging our school systems to criminalize behavior that ought not to be criminalized. And, you know, in Champaign, and particularly where I live, there's a lot of concern about the use of student resource officers in the school systems, so that a lot of young people who are attending the public schools, you know, it's almost kind of like rather than graduating and going off to college, they're graduating and they're going off to prison. And I'm concerned about, you know, the impact that's having on youth. So I think a larger conversation needs to be held with school boards about, you know, what kind of rules are being developed, what kind of policies are being developed, what kind of procedures are being developed, and how they're being implemented. For me, you know, I live in the Garden Hills district in Champaign, and I'm not that far from where the former public housing facility, Joanne Dorsey, they're in the process of tearing that place down. And prior to that, there was some local controversy coming up saying that a lot of these residents had no place to go. They had no place to live. And so you're having people who are essentially being made homeless as a result of these policy decisions, and they're having to do things like possibly maybe lie about where they live so they can send their child to school. And so, you know, housing issues is something that I think that this county board needs to look at. You know, and there is a certain amount of poverty, you know, even in like Homer, Broadlands, Longview. So, you know, issues of, you know, not having enough money, that's not just a Champaign or Urbana issue. That's an entire county issue. You know, basically, you know, law enforcement and the legal system often favors people who can afford the best defense that money can buy. Mm-hmm. And so there's some class issues as well that I think are worth being addressed. I don't know what the solutions are, but I think that when it comes down to expanding upon what, you know, somebody earlier was talking about, the human rights perspective, we need to include not just our city and local governments, but we also need to include school boards and have dialogue engaged in what is going on within the school systems. You know, earlier this week, I think Centennial had to go under a soft lockdown because the credit union was robbed. That's located by there. And then earlier today, Central had a lockdown because allegedly somebody had a gun. That's according to the News Gazette, which, again, that's all I know. But when it comes down to having this conversation, I do feel that that's something that does need to be expanded to include the school systems.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was going to let you guys have closing comments. I just wanted to, first of all, just say to everyone who came, we appreciate your participation. And if we can get a round of applause for the audience. How about that? And in closing, just to sort of to wrap up what I think we've heard here tonight, is that this issue, I think there was a very effective job here tonight of showing that this issue is not just this very closed issue that many of us may think, or maybe even some of the board members may think, including the comments that you've made here, to expand into the pipeline from schoolhouse to jailhouse type of concept. And maybe we'll start to understand the roles that jails, county jails, play in that whole process. And that is something that I think would be new information, or something that we would ask that the other board members think more about. So I do think this broader conversation, maybe on a county level, as Belden Field said, should take place. I don't want to open this up to, I see a couple hands going up in the audience, but I think if we do that, we're going to open up a whole nother can of worms. An announcement? I think we can handle an announcement, but Ken's not in the audience, so we're fine. Go ahead.
Announcement.
Please, come on. Yeah.
Monday night, the Urbana City Council will be addressing a resolution that the mayor is proposing that they sign off on regarding the Police Training Institute in Champaign Urbana, which I think most of the people in the community are familiar with, that they are closing it because the university decided not to fund it. The resolution that she is asking the community of Urbana to sign off on is to keep in some form or fashion the Police Training Institute here, and she wants that to go to the state legislature. But if you look at Section 2, Line 6, it is funded through a surge charge on the criminal. Instead of the university can't afford to pay to keep it here, the state of Illinois is not funding it. So the proposal that Naomi Jacobson, our state representative, and Chapin Rose and Mayor Prussing is supporting is in fact a surcharge on the criminal to keep the Police Training Institute in Champaign Urbana. So that resolution was postponed 1 week because she put it on the agenda. It wasn't on the original agenda Monday night, and it is being voted on this Monday night, so you might want to contact the city council representatives and let them know that you oppose that particular line in the resolution on behalf of the citizens of Urbana. Thank you.
Thank you. And since this is airing, we're live on air right now, Friday, May 11th, 2012. Monday will be the 14th, if I have that correct, at 7 o'clock right here in the city council chambers, just so you're not watching it too late and think you're supposed to come at another time. Please do come out. One of the classic lines from a movie a long time ago called Colors. One of the guys who was arrested, he said he was given the opportunity to either pay the parking tickets or go to jail. He said, "I have more time than money." Please, Judah.
Thanks. Just to sort of respond to the comment about youth in the community and sort of the school to prison pipeline, which is enough of a term now that it sort of speaks to sort of how this problem exists in probably every community. It exists in ours. It's a bit of a down note to end on, I guess, so I apologize for that. It's a bit of a word of caution, I guess. We've talked a lot, or I guess we've heard a lot about promoting alternatives to incarceration, which is obviously something we all support. There's a danger with that term because it can be utilized to sort of rationalize what we call net widening, which is essentially promoting or institutionalizing alternatives that wind up ensnaring people who wouldn't otherwise be in the system. And so in Bloomington, what's happened, one of the ways in which the school to prison pipeline has been sort of solidified is by something called truancy court. So truancy isn't handled by a teacher or a principal, it's handled in a courtroom by a judge who has the power to remand that youth to detention. And so that as just sort of one example to sort of put out there that as you're talking about sustainable, empowering alternatives, to also be aware that there are very much ways in which so-called alternatives to incarceration can actually bring more people into the confines of the system, wind up with more people under sort of community surveillance, community control. And so just to sort of put that out there, just to be sure that that's sort of on everyone's minds.
Any final comments? Final comments from anyone on the panel here?
I'll just thank
Lindsay was going to go. We want
sorry.
you to have the last word, Sister Carol, if that's all right. Oh, okay.
I actually sort of have a question that I hope you all will continue to mull over. We've talked a lot about prison and facility, and just in the last couple of comments, we've started to talk a little bit more about policing. And police discrepancy in Bloomington. And earlier I was having a conversation about how in Champaign a lot of the police officers are pulled in from outside the county. And I sort of think it's important for this dialogue to not just be about facility, but also be about who's being policed, which gets into our questions of race and class if we're seeing such huge discrepancies between the numbers of people who are incarcerated who are African American and those who are actually in population numbers. And ask also about what areas are being hyper-policed. And if this question of policing and the Training Institute might be something that needs to really be taken up alongside these broader questions of what sorts of facilities people will eventually be put in if they must be put in one.
Thank you very much. Miko.
I want to speak to the question of the school to prison pipeline at the level of what I've been calling the common sense around incarceration, or you might also want to call it the ideological investment in incarceration. When you think about the profits that people have or the investments that they have in the system, they're not only financial, they're also psychological. Right? The way we think about prisons allows us to think a lot of things about ourselves, about morality, worth, merit, about the possibility for the individual to make decisions about their lives, and the notion that the U.S. might be a meritocracy where those who deserve good things get them. And the ways that prisons have changed the way we think are profound. That prisons are working their toxic magic on us by changing the ways that we understand our relationships to each other, making us afraid of each other. And the fact that schools act in ways that sort of quasi-criminalize students is not only because of decisions that school boards make, but just because of the ways that prisons distribute their kind of toxic ways of thinking throughout society. So when we're thinking about fighting the prison industrial complex, it's not just about following the money. It's also about figuring out ideology or ways of thinking or common sense, however you want to think about it. We have to be smart about it and understand it on those levels also.
Thank you very much.
I do want to thank the other county board members who took our invitation to come out tonight and listen to the panel. I want to reiterate that Champaign Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice will continue to work on this issue. I will continue to work on this issue even after my term ends at the county board. We do not believe that 20 plus any millions should be spent to close the downtown facility. We do not want more jail space. We want more resources to be put into real alternatives to incarceration. We understand that people are really struggling to make simple ends meet, and therefore we have a lot more incarceration on the front that we really need to look at with social improvements. The national trend to decarcerate is pretty clear and evident. It doesn't take this county panel to find that research. It doesn't take that. It is all there and easy to find. Please do some work on this issue. 50% of those over in our county jail are African Americans. The question needs to be bared out as to why, and that needs to be put forward in a real discussion in this community. And I want to thank Dr. Rachel Schwartz for doing the work on the money. The money is difficult. It's really hard to follow the money. But as we get more educated about this issue, we'll see that there are alternatives, and we will put forward alternatives. Let's just see if we're open for them. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you all.
Judah and Aaron, did you all have anything to add?
I just want to thank everyone for coming. It's been great to hear from all of you, and I think that it sounds very promising, the opinions and the ideas that everyone has had. It sounds like you all are on the same page about what you want for your community, and considering that you all are the ones that are really in power, I will be excited to see when your county does not build a new jail. So good luck, and thank you.
Thank you. Rachel.
I just would like to reiterate the point I made before, that contrary to common belief, we're not done paying for the loan we took up in 1999 for the courthouse and the juvenile detention center. In fact, we have about $30 million of principal that we owe right now. It's scheduled to be paid through 2029, not 2015, and together with interest, it's about $50 million. If we borrow 20 million, not 20 plus, just 20 million, and pay nothing but the interest, we still can't afford it with the existing quarter-cent sales tax. So there will have to be another source of revenue, probably property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Let's give a round of applause to the entire panel, please. Making a trip, on the highway and just sacrificing your time and energy. We really appreciate the experiences and the expertise that you all brought to us tonight. I know you have been in conversation, via phone and stuff like that, but to actually meet everyone was a pleasure. And so saying to the viewers out there, that, you know, these types of events are extremely important for the entire community, because you get these experiences that happened in other places that we would not have heard of, and were it not for the research of people like James Kilgore, Chris Evans, who went out and found, who looked for things and found these people and reached out to them and asked them to come and sit and share their experiences with us. We've benefited tremendously from them being here. We've also benefited, I think, from the synergy and the energy in the room from all of us. And I think it's pretty clear that there needs to be more discussion about this, and there are other ways for us to address the issues of facilities issues, to address the ideologies. And one of the things that I talk to Carol about all the time is that I think it's unfair to only come to our elected officials when we have problems, and not come to them when they've done something positive. And also, I think it's unfair for them to be in the position solely of trying to figure out ways to address issues of economics when everything that we come to the table with costs money, right? So when we come to the table with things that save money, or come to the table with things that would help alleviate some of the financial concerns, I think that helps tremendously. And I think one of the things that I got from tonight was that there are ways to do that, to alleviate some of the pressures so we don't go further in debt, but also address the issues that the county is facing. So I just thank you all for coming out. It's been a tremendous time.
There's material in the back.
There's material and food in the back. Please do not forget to sign up so that we can contact you. And just thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
DMC business card or something.